Barb Higgins here, welcoming you to 1,000 Tiny Steps. In this podcast, I share my stories of love, loss, triumph, and tragedy as I continue to trace my steps backward and ponder what led to the death of my daughter, Molly. If you're ready to laugh, cry, shake your head in disbelief, or simply listen, and tie, buckle, slip on, or lace up your shoes, and join me as we begin our 1,000 Tiny Steps. Hey, everybody. Barb Higgins here, welcoming you to episode 80 of 1,000 Tiny Steps. Whenever I get caught up in a number, like an anniversary number or whatever, I always think of a guy named Chris Sullivan. He used to coach track with me in Concord High years and years ago. And he always was like, why do we celebrate like increments of 5? Like all high school reunions are every 5 years. Why not every 4 years? Why not every 7 years? And it's true, what's so much better about episode 80 than episode 79? But 80 is just this round number. It's like I've finished 10 decades worth of podcast episodes. It makes me laugh. But anyway, this is episode 80, so welcome everybody. I'm knee deep into some pretty difficult parts of my life and stories to tell. I re-listen. In a couple of these episodes, I sound all frantic and frenetic and I'm talking really fast. And then last week's is much more thoughtful and sort of laid out and not quite as frenetic. But it's hard. It's hard to retell a story that decimated you and really that you never dealt with in any good way. We're in between 2 snowstorms here. It's March 2nd as I record this, which is the first day of the fast in the Baha'i faith. And so I'm not fasting, obviously, because I'm still nursing Jack. But it always is a 19-day period of time leading into spring where I'm always thinking about sort of healthy choices and bettering myself and trying to think outside of my own needs and things like this. And knee deep into this part of my life from 2009 to 2005 actually, but 2009 to 2016, job loss to Molly loss, a big lesson is learning how to say no. But that doesn't mean that you can't live a life of service. One just has to be mindful on who they're offering their service to. So I finished up last time in the fall of 2011, and it was the first fall really in my life that I hadn't gone back to school, either as a student, that's 20 years, and then I had 1 year off, so I didn't go back to school. I was a cocktail waitress. And then I started teaching in Woburn in 1987. So from 1987 all the way until 2010, I went back to school. The fall of 2011 was a tricky one for me. Things were also extremely strained with Roy, although so much of the legal stuff and the fallout, both of the treatment of him and his divorce, treatment of me and my exit from the school district, kept us both very busy with sort of legal activities and things. So when I look back now on how did I spend all these years living this double life, like how and why, I realized there was so much more to it than just some scandalous relationship. When I think of the best of Roy, I think that he loved me and that he had some need to be with me and wanted me in his life. And then at other times, I just think, I don't know. And I know for me, it was a very panicky, please don't leave, please don't leave, please don't leave. And there are times in my life I still feel that way. All these years later, Molly's death, separating, Roy and I spent a lot of time together, reconnecting after Molly's death, talking and meeting for dinner and spending time together. And no one knows about that. And it wasn't like, oh, let's restart this big love affair. At least he made it very clear that would never happen. I don't know that I would have done that either. I wanted Jack and I had Jack. And I was supposed to have Jack. I had this family, Jack's dad is Kenney and his sister is Gracie and his mother is me. And whatever Jack's purpose is here, that's much more important than whatever trauma bond I might have with Roy. But I feel that I have to be transparent and honest in telling this story. I can't leave out parts that are difficult because then I'm just lying. And then I'm telling history with an agenda that defies truth. That makes sense. One of my favorite conversations was with a history professor. And somebody asked him, what do you think of stories people share? Because every history book is somebody telling a story of what they remember of an event. And the history student, he's getting a PhD in history, said, it's not what they say, it's why they're telling it. Like, why are you telling the story? What's your motive? And so that's been very, very, very forefront in the process of this, because I do not want it to come across as something vindictive slaying of people. Everything I'm talking about, you can Google and read. I'm not giving any new information except the nature of my relationship with Roy, which I was very unwilling to share with the Concord Monitor and write about in Patch and all of that. This is my podcast and my voice, and I can share what I want here. And people can listen or not listen. So that's the one piece of this story that you won't find if you Google it. although the monitor did a very good job of setting the stage for leaving speculation among the citizens of Concord. The fall of 2011, I'm sad. I remember Robin right around the first day of school, and it was right when I found out about my neighbors hating me and telling me that they wouldn't work with me in road races. It was just this bizarre thing. And Robin took me to Smile Yoga, and it was like laugh yoga. It was laugh yoga, and it was in this building called the Smile Building. And you just looked at each other and fake laugh, and then we laughed and laughed. Robin and I had no trouble laughing. In my last episode, I talked about meeting Robin sort of in the spring, almost summer of 2011. And then we didn't really connect or anything, but she did offer me a job. And so I went and started working at Flips. And they had just opened another part of their business called Jumps. And it was all these inflatables. It's a blast. Kids loved it. So they have this big gymnastics gym and a competitive gymnastics team and, toddler programs and everything. So I started working there, and I taught some baby classes. I went in the mornings with her. And then she would always typically have to stay and do, a lot of the cleaning and all that. And so by hiring me to do it, she could go and get other things done. That really is a family business. I had a lot of alone time there, and that was hard on me because I just thought I should be in a classroom. A year ago from now, I was in the classroom. 2 years ago from now, I thought I would teach for another 20 years. And so that was a difficult time. One of my biggest athletes, when I say biggest, the biggest in my life, was a girl named Skye. She ran for me. She was an incredible athlete. And she was a track runner, and she ran cross country, and she was just a big part of my life. I spent a lot of time with Skye. And after she graduated and I had lost my job, she, had some struggles in her collegiate choice and what to do next after high school, and choosing good boyfriends that were healthy and relationships and living on her own. And so I spent a ton of time helping Skye, just answering the phone in the middle of the night or picking her up, and helping her move out of an apartment, like all sorts of things. And I was happy to do it because I loved her. She was one of my runners, and Molly and Gracie loved her. She would always come over with little gifties for them. Shortly before Molly died, she came over with all these Vera Bradley pocketbooks and wallets. Molly and Gracie were beside themselves. I'm at Flips, and Skye texts me and says, "Do you want coffee?" And I would love coffee. So she brings me a cup of coffee, and she comes into Flips, and she's chatting away, and I introduce her to Robin, and Skye applies for a job. Robin needs some extra help. Would you like to work here? Skye said yes. So she starts working at Flips. So I have to say, as unhappy as my life was, jumping into working at Flips, VLAX as well. So now I have 2 streams of income, plus the road race timing, plus the indoor track meet. So I was starting to piece together, 7 days a week working, enough money to get our bills paid. Health insurance was a huge issue. We had none now. So we just stopped going to the doctor, the dentist for a while. She starts working at Flips. And so the fall into the winter of 2011, 2012, in my day-to-day life was okay. It was manageable. The beautiful thing about Flips is that Molly and Gracie could come and take classes there for free. And they had gymnastics classes. So a couple nights a week, they had dance. Another couple nights a week, they came to Flips. I just look at those years, and Gracie and I talk about it now. So, they were like 3rd and 5th grade, then 4th and 6th grade, then 5th and 7th, I think is when started to wean away from the gymnastics. And it was the first sign of Molly having something weird with her body because she started to have all this weird back pain. And back pain is a sign of cranial pressure issues, which, I didn't know at the time. So those years, 2011, 2012, 2013, well, the last part of 2011, I look back on with a big measure of happiness. I had this undercurrent, this undertone of anxiety and sadness and grief because I had lost a career that was important to me. And for some reason, I applied for jobs in a couple of other districts and was offered 2 jobs in different districts. And I said no. And I had this fear of committing myself to another school district. And I regret that now because I do believe those little choices, so much of my motivation behind my choices was leaving myself flexible and open for Roy. Because if I were working full time again, I'm busy all the time, when would we ever see each other? And he would leave me. It sounds so needy and pathetic, but it was just in the core of my being. I had lost everything. I was humiliated. I was a pariah in Concord. So the Flips piece was incredibly helpful because I'm working with kids. The little kids loved me and the parents loved me. And most of the people I met didn't give 2 hoots about the Concord School District. So it worked out fine. I had some positive things happening. And by the holiday season, so this would be Roy's and my 3rd Christmas now, spending time together, things were better. I have some beautiful gifts and things that I bought for Gracie and Molly on my visits and just shopping downtown, having dinner, going out for dinner at some of those restaurants. It was all walking distance from where he lived. And, it was just beautiful. I'd been long enough out of the district now that I could sort of identify my life as my own. Roy and I also, our times together were much more planned out. He was still coming to New Hampshire to visit Morgan. Roy couldn't take her to his house yet. Like it was still visitation centers or coming to Concord and meeting at the visitation center and driving around. It was convenient because then he would work it so we would spend time together. I remember one time running with Skye, actually. We were out running together and the visitation center was right there at the time. And we're running by and a car drives in front of us and it was Amy. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then of course there's Roy's car there. And so we just quickly turned around and went back to the high school because I just didn't want to be accused of, stalking or whatever. It was one of those horrible coincidences. That school year, 2011, 2012, Roy still had enough reasons to be in Concord or around Concord that we could still see one another relatively easily up here. We'd go for dinner, we'd go to a bed and breakfast or these kinds of things. We would just figure out ways to spend time together. And, as romantic as a lot of our time together was, it was also a lot of time trying to hold the school district accountable for what they did to me and trying to hold the legal system, family court accountable for what Roy's divorce did to him. And so, again, this is where I sort of felt like I was being helpful. We were looking into not letting other people get treated the way we did. I remember Roy wanted to write a book called Crazy Wives, Crazy or something like that. And he had actually started it. But that's the level he was at. Like he was really, really just, blown away by all that had happened to him. The house had sold, that I remember. And this was also a time that the abuse of me by Amy and Bob would continue. I can remember driving home from Concord Dance Academy once. It was probably 2012, maybe even 2013, but it's an example of what would happen. Roy would get an email from Bob, this nasty email saying horrible things. Roy's mom passed away when he was married to Amy, and Bob would say these terrible things about Roy's mother. Like, she's dead. Good Lord. Why would you insult somebody's passed away mother? That's just classless. And there was one really nasty, nasty threatening email. And in that email, he warned me to look out for myself. Tell your little girlfriend to look out for herself and her kids. Really, really scared me. It scared me unbelievably. I would get these threatening, emails, or the voicemail stopped. But Robert called Kenney at work. He just had this vicious, anger at me that I could not understand. And I couldn't understand what was fueling it. Obviously, it was Amy fueling it. And if I had to be like all detective about it, Amy was very, very good at facilitating people to do things that she wanted them to do, and then she didn't have to take the blame. So when we had the restraining order piece, she hadn't sent the emails to me, he had. The worst thing that he did, and this actually got me a restraining order as well as Roy, he was included in it because so much of it was against us. He wrote an article, like a nasty letter to the Concord Monitor, created a fake email, and he wrote this horror, something I would never say. It was just, had they printed it as coming from me, it would have humiliated me. It would have been very embarrassing and caused me trouble in the school board. Fortunately, a reporter from the Monitor reached out and said, hey, can you call me about the email you just sent? And I said, I didn't send an email. What are you talking about? She calls me and she forwards me the email. And I said, no, my email address is this. This was not written by me. And so I hired a technically savvy person to search the IP address of this email. And the IP address came up, it pinged 2 towers. There were 2 emails sent both to Roy and to me from Robert. The IP addresses were the same. Both of those cell towers were within a half a mile of the business that Robert worked for. And so I had evidence. So when we would go to these restraining orders, typically Robert would stand up and just talk about everything bad I had done in my life. Like, she's a liar and she cheats on people, and nothing to do with him. He's just up there sort of slandering me as a human being. And so then when I gave the evidence and said, look, the statute says I fear for my safety, here's an email saying I need to watch out, and he just sent a fake email to the newspaper, was granted a restraining order. All of these things happened between 2011 and say 2013. Ongoing battle for me. So that was the hard side of my life. And that was the connection to Roy piece still. A lot of our connections were spending time at the courthouse, spending time at all these different places, in all these different things, trying to get justice. It was during this time that Roy went after Chris Rath. And I remember that garnered quite a bit of press coverage. And he actually was allowed to question Chris Rath. And he was upset that he didn't know ahead of time he could do it. And I was on the school board at this time, of course. Another board member, Cass Ardinger, went with Chris to this. I'm not sure why she went, but she did. Didn't need to be there. It had nothing to do with her. And they were livid, just furious. But here's the biggest thing was, Roy, it was a right to know request. He wanted all emails that had his name in them, my name in them, related to the situation. And of course, when you had a right to know request, you have to produce the emails. You can't just say no. So she wanted to say no. So they go to court. So she tried to say the emails don't exist and they would have to be redacted, all this stuff. And she had these boxes of paper. And so Roy was like, so you see the emails don't exist? Yes. What are those boxes there? Well, those are the emails, the ones that don't exist. And so, of course, he talked her right into a corner. So it was helpful in the sense that it was public and she got questioned. We did not end up getting the emails. Sometimes we felt very vindicated. He did a lot of work against Amy's divorce lawyer, a lot of things that she had done, and she got into some trouble. She got some sanctions and some disciplinary actions from the Bar Association. Again, this isn't typically behavior of mine, like fighting to keep the buildings from being torn down and knowing when I should, like a lot of my behaviors were just so driven by my desire to keep Roy and to make sure he would stay with me. And I have to be honest, he is a very addicting boyfriend or partner or whatever. He pulls you in and gets you all excited, and he's good at it. And it's not a bad thing. He, can get you excited about good things as well. We kayaked and hiked and biked. We did a lot of things together. The number of bike rides we went on, 2-minute account, and they were wonderful. My life post school district employment wasn't all terrible. And the people that mattered to me reached out to help. I was teaching a class at Concord Dance Academy. I taught a couple of classes there. I would go months without paying money. And Cindy would say, what do you have? Can you just give me something every week? And so some weeks I could give her $30. Some weeks I could give her $130. Some weeks I could give her $10. But I went in and tried to give her something every week. I would time all these road races in the summer and catch up. And then so I could start the next dance year without a debt. And it was difficult because Gracie and Molly, competitive dancers, there were competition fees. We didn't really increase the number of their dances until I started making a lot more money at VLAX. Through 2012, my relationship with Roy continued, as I've said, and I began to develop a much bigger presence at both Flips and VLAX. And so I was teaching a lot more students, making a lot more money. And that was a job I could do in my house. And so it was nice because I was still really humbled by and embarrassed by what had happened to me. And I was officiating indoor track meets. The hard part about that was I would see the Concord athletes. Now, when I did indoor track, we had like 60 people on the team, girls, just girls. Now they were back down to like 10 again. That part was hard because I knew that the kids were suffering. They didn't need to. Amy and Bob think they hurt me, and they did, but they hurt so many athletes and runners and students that never got to have me as a teacher. But the officiating was fun, and that was great money. It was cash money. I missed a ton of dance comps though, because it was weekends, and I didn't want to not make the money. I could make, $350, $400 in a weekend. And 10, 12 years ago, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money now. I didn't like to say no to that because it was a short period of time and it was cash money. There were times that I would come home. I remember one time a big fight with Kenney. I came home from officiating a track meet and the dance competition was in Concord. I almost went straight there from officiating, but no, I'll go home and pee and all this. Kenny's home watching a football game. And I'm like, why aren't you at the Capitol Center? And I just don't think he thought, I'm like, if it was a boy in a baseball game, he'd be there. Like, why are you not what? So nobody's there watching our daughters and the competition's here. Like, that was a huge issue for me. And I know now that Molly's gone, Kenney has a lot of regret around all of those dance comps that he blew off because they are tedious after a while. You're just listening and watching and whatever. Social media wasn't on phones like it is now. So there wasn't so much to do at a dance comp. You'd have to bring something to read. So that was my life. I was balancing family life here. I was clinging sometimes to Roy. When I look for like text conversations or I go back on Facebook now, I can't message Roy on Messenger, but I can go back all the way back. And so I do that sometimes. It's hard though, because it's hard to read all that. And it was around 2012, 2013 that the tension was building. And so we would have fights. And Roy is a big fan of some pretty horrifying words. The dirty C word is one of his favorites. And I can remember him using that word in anger against, Amy and other things in his life that happened. I remember the first time he used it against me. And I'm like, did you just call me that word? Did you really just call me that word? And he was like, shut the fuck up and go fuck yourself. And I don't know what the fight was about, but I know that it was 99.9% sure it was that I was still here. And my main reason for staying here was these two little girls that I wanted them to have a life that wasn't traumatic. I didn't want to rip them from everything they knew, nor did I want to leave them because Kenney had gotten sick. So I'll get into that in a minute. He had been sick for a long time, but it was really, really amplifying. I just felt sort of trapped. Sometimes Roy was this one little happy sort of escape. And sometimes it was terrifying. And he would, not speak to me for 3 or 4 days and I'd be a basket case and a mess. And then often what would happen is I'd hear from him again and I would be all upset and thinking we would have to talk it out. And he would act like nothing at all had happened. Like, hey. And I would just be like, oh my God. And he's like, why are you so upset? Calm down. You should know better by now. And so there are times that I, to this day, we don't speak. And I think, oh, if only I hadn't pleaded with him so much, he wouldn't have, cut me off. What is wrong with me that I even go there and think that? But that's how it is. And that pattern of behavior began way back then, where please don't leave me, please don't leave me. And he would get upset with me. I will say I never made him promises that I couldn't keep. I never said someday I'll leave Kenney. I never said any of these things. Kenney and I did end up getting divorced. 2012 and then into 2013, we started getting very, very strained. And then we would have periods of time that we weren't strained. I talked before about a lot of the things that might be happening in his life that could affect how we were. And one of the times he was furloughed, he did a lot of work for his landlord and he was very busy doing a ton of stuff. It made him really happy because he does like to feel useful. And I know that when he does things that make people appreciative, it feeds his ego a bit. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, sometimes maybe, but he was super busy and super happy. And those would tend to be times that we were okay. The one major thing that was a change in my life in the fall of 2011, other than losing my job, running for school board, working at Flips, is I started CrossFit. That's when I started CrossFit. And that goes back to Skye, my friend Skye. And she started working at Flips and she was very fit. And she started talking about this new sport called CrossFit. And that her dad had joined a CrossFit gym. And I would love it because it's something different every day and it's not running. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I really just blew it off. So Robin joined. So I would stay late on Wednesday. She would go off to the 1:00 class and I would stay. So all of a sudden, I just noticed this unbelievably massive change in her. Like she started in September. And by late October, early November, I'm like, what is happening to you? And in those 2 months, like the neck, the thinner, the muscle, it was dramatic. So I'm like, all right, fine, I'll go watch a class. And so I went and watched a class. I sat on a big stack of tires in this nasty looking gym. And I watched a class. And so the coach and owner at that time was John Farwell and Brad Newberry, although he wasn't there that day. And I said, all right, I want to join. Here's the credit card. And John looked at me like, well, you have to do the training. You can't just join. And I'm like, I can do all of this. I was a Division I All-American. I was just so full of myself. He said, okay, well, let's try a month and see what happens. The rest is history. I went the next day and then I started going just 3 days a week. And it was life-changing for a million things. I had put a lot of weight. I weighed about 147. Like I'm 143 right now and I feel pretty good about it. But back then I weighed 130 forever. I just never gained weight. Even after having babies, I got back to 130 and that's what I weighed. I went from 147 to like 127 from November 17th to like January 6th or 7th. I remember people thought I was sick. I officiated track meets. And so I officiated a meet before Christmas. And then like 2 months later, these coaches from Kenney High School saw me and they thought they're like, oh my God, are you sick? And I'm like, no, I joined a CrossFit gym, but I lost weight really dramatically. But not only that, I found a community again. And that's what I had lost so much in losing my job is I lost my community. Track practice, even as the coach, you have this group of people you see every day. You're a family. You create community on that sports team. And in your classroom, I'm a teacher, but you see those kids, for 9 straight weeks, I would see the same 100 kids and then a new set. So it was this constant interaction and community. And so CrossFit became that in my life. I loved it. You show up, someone else decides your workout, they explain how to do it, they warm you up, you do the workout, and you go home. It takes away all the thinking, I have to go do this. I loved going to CrossFit. So in my whole life was now CrossFit and Robin. So CrossFit, Flips, and Robin all the time. And then I would squeeze the VLAX in around everything else, which wasn't difficult. I mean, I had my VLAX days and my Flips days. But it also brought Gracie and Molly into my life. The one majorly positive thing about losing my job is that I had unlimited time and opportunity to be with Gracie and Molly in their school activities. I just loved the fact that I could be with them so much. And Gracie and I talk about that a lot too. We get really sad and like I'm getting a knot in my stomach now as I talk about it because it makes me miss Molly. Oh, breathe. I'm sorry. Those times were just as stressful as it was. I thought the worst thing that could ever happen to me had happened. That I lost my job, but I was okay. I was fit. I was in shape. I started competing in CrossFit competitions. I was successful. I had this thing and I had this friend. And Robin, I look at it now and a lot of it's the same sort of love bombing and idealization. We were together all the time. We did social things on the weekends. We did sleepovers at Flips. We had so much fun. We really did. I don't know that I would have been okay for 2012 and 2013 if it weren't for Robin. I do remember a friend of mine, a dance mom, sending me a private message and just saying, just be careful because once she's sort of done, she'll change her mind, create a reason to hate you and never talk to you again. And of course, that was a very similar pattern to Roy, who, I mean, he doesn't talk to me now. It's been almost 2 years, but he would withdraw, like, I'm out of here. And then just not answer his phone, not tell me where he was, unfriend me on Facebook, like this pattern of behavior. And that was sort of the punishment. If I was out of line, he would just disappear. So the thought that Robin might be this way weighed on me heavy. And so, of course, I went out of my way to just always be exactly what she wanted me to be. And it wasn't hard, quite honestly. She was really good at getting groups of people together. We had some of my funnest memories, some of my happiest Facebook posts are from time spent with her. And the hard part, I guess, too, in having these people in your life, like so much of my history with Roy was on Facebook, and he went back and erased everything. I do know that Facebook data is forever. Even if you erase it, it's not erased. I could buy my Facebook data all the way back to when I joined Facebook. And there's a part of me that would love to do that just because to just be sort of cut off like that and just disappear. I have jobs that are getting better. I have tons of time with Gracie and Molly. I have a relationship with Roy that, as drama-filled and up and down as it is, has developed consistency and a bit of predictability. I have this sport that isn't running that brings me as much joy, if not more, than running ever did. So all of these things were good. So the remaining piece was Kenney. And so we still had some significant financial issues that were mind-boggling and could have decimated us. It was in 2013 that we split up the bills and we did what we could. And he was in charge of the mortgage, and his kids were in college, and he started paying college instead of the mortgage. And that was his thing to take care of. That was it. That was his one payment. And then I had to pay everything else. And so all of a sudden I open the newspaper and there's a picture of our house and it says public auction Sunday. And this was like Wednesday. So I take the newspaper to Kenney and I'm like, what the heck? He goes, oh, don't worry. I'll talk to them. And I'm like, Kenney, there's no talking. The only way out of this is that we pay off what we owe. What do we owe? So we owed like $13,000. We had no money. So I got on Facebook, my Jeep is for sale. Tell me what you'll give me. I just was trying to raise this money. So I have two people in my life, my friend Jack and my sister Martha, who lent me the money. There was no electronic payments either. I had to mail it, like overnight mail it. And it was like a Friday. And it was, I was just, oh my God, I was just horrified. It was the most horrible thing ever. And so obviously we didn't lose the house. But this was one of the things that kept me here, is that I knew that if I left, all of this would disappear. And maybe it's just a house and a match could burn it to the ground. But it's Gracie and Molly's home, and it was what I wanted for them. I had such a traumatic childhood. I didn't want theirs to be traumatic. And I was doing all of these things that were going to bring trauma in, by getting involved with his family and staying connected to Roy. The other piece of Kenney is that he was not well. He got very sick. So I was at Concord Dance Academy one night and my phone rings and it's Katie, his oldest daughter. And so I realized, I'm like, why is she calling me? So she says that she's at the hospital. She had taken him to the ER. So what happened is Kenney came home and he wasn't okay. His kidneys were in rough shape. And he came home and he went and lay down in bed. And my mother was downstairs with the girls and he was calling her for help. Help, Sharon, help. And she slammed the door saying, don't wake up your daddy. He's sleeping. So now he's upstairs and he's in so much pain he can't move. So he called me. And I remember looking at the phone and thinking, he knows I'm teaching. So I didn't answer, which I felt terrible about after. So then Katie calls and I realized something's not right. And so he was hospitalized. His kidneys were so dry and his kidney function was so poor that he was really hours away from likely dying. So he had quite a long hospital stay. So I was in a panic because we have no health insurance. So the girls were at school the next day. I went through all of our paperwork. I organized our banks. I just organized all of our finances into this nice, neat bin because I needed something to do when I was just freaking out. Just didn't know what to do. And so we went back to the hospital, and Concord Hospital has this amazing financial assistance program. And that became our health insurance, Concord Hospital Financial Assistance. As long as we used a Concord Hospital practice, it was paid. I mean, there was some co-pays and things, but it was insurance. So Kenney's entire hospital stay, 4 days, paid for. I have never been so relieved in my life. And at that time, the Concord Hospital, the liaison there said that I should apply for Medicaid. So we did. I applied for Medicaid for all of us. And so we had food stamps, an EBT card and health insurance, plus the Concord Hospital financial assistance. So for the next, really up until Molly died, we had that insurance. But the medical insurance piece, especially for Gracie and Molly, covered completely. Kenney's kidney disease qualified him for a lot of kidney foundation help and Medicare, or disability rather. At that time as well, right around 2013, he applied for disability. So I had this stable life, and then all the explosions of job loss and public humiliation and everything else, and Kenney being sick. In all of that trauma and all of that craziness, some really positive things occurred all this time with my girls, which I love. I'll end here. That was, 2011 to all of 2012 and 2013 into sort of the fall of 2013. I became very, very stable and situated in spending a lot of time with Robin, working at Flips, working at VLAX, getting an increasing number of students at VLAX, timing road races, officiating track meets. I had put together a life for myself that paid for everything I did. I also was a competitive tap dancer. It was another way to spend time with Gracie and Molly. And I'm not quite sure why I gave that up, but I did. And I really regretted it because it could have been helpful through the years right after Molly died, just maintaining that connection with conga dance. Sort of the momentum from all the things that happened that connected Roy and I together, Amy and Bob and the divorce, and then the job loss and Chris Rath and all of that and the legal stuff, it really bound us together and it gave us a focus and sort of a reason to stay together, even though the logistics of the relationship weren't good. And it wasn't good. It was wonderful. Let me just be clear. It's hard for me to say that because I married Kenney thinking he was the love of my life. The whirlwind of things that led me into this reality. I think a lot in the car. I drive a lot right now. When Jack is asleep, sometimes I listen to music or a podcast, and sometimes I just think. And I just think, how did that happen? Like, how did it happen? How did I go from A to Q? It's so quickly. So anyway, thank you for listening. I really do appreciate it. I'm doing a lot of Facebook Lives now, especially through the month of March. 1% habit changes each day, a 1% change in a habit. So I'm on day 2. This is the month of March for me. So day 1 is reflective, prayerful moments, a handful a day. I'm not going to make myself do a number. Just do it. Just introduce, Allah. That's a Baha'i one-word prayer. So that. And then my 1% change for today is water. Just drink more water. Like when I walk by a faucet, drink of water. So I have little cups all around my house and water bottles full of water stashed everywhere. So I'm never in a room without a water bottle. So as always, be good to yourself. Choose a 1% change in your life that could have 1,000% positive effect. Be good to someone else. Small favors sometimes also give the biggest hugs. And as always, have a good day, everybody. Hey, thanks for listening and for supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and to share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories. I love connecting with my listeners. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.